We've had lost civilizations before. It was found by accident, and every turn of the archaeologist's spade can reveal new information.
We all know we're not the first advanced civilization to walk this earth. There have been countless others, some far more advanced than we are today. Civilizations that conquered, thrived, and then disappeared. But what if I told you that they didn't just vanish? What if every lost civilization follows an eerily similar pattern? Göbekli Tepe was buried on purpose.
Very difficult to know what the purpose of something like Göbekli Tepe could be.
Atlantis vanished without a trace.
Huge amount of unrecorded human history beneath the ocean surface that we don't know very much about at all.
These weren't accidents. These were decisions. But even in their disappearance, these civilizations left behind something. Clues, warnings, stories etched in stone. They tell us how they lived, how they perished, and perhaps most importantly, what destroyed them. So what can we learn from the ruins they left behind before the same pattern repeats itself? What really happened to the people of Göbekli Tepe? Göbekli Tepe, the place that shouldn't exist. Historians believe they had the story of civilization figured out. First came the hunter-gatherers living in small tribes with no permanent settlements. Then, around 3000 to 4000 BCE, we discovered agriculture, formed cities, built temples, and invented writing. That was the accepted timeline. Simple, linear, safe. But then, something was discovered in the hills of southeastern Turkey. Something that didn't fit the story archaeologists had written. Göbekli Tepe. Discovered in 1994 by a Kurdish shepherd and excavated under the direction of German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, Göbekli Tepe didn't just push the timeline of civilization back, it shattered it. At first, it was dismissed as just another ancient ruin, the remnants of yet another forgotten culture. But the more they dug, the more things stopped making sense. It was a monumental ceremonial complex built over 11,000 years ago, around 9600 BCE, at the very end of the last ice age. That's more than 7,000 years older than the pyramids, and over 6,000 years before Stonehenge. This means this wasn't the work of a developed empire with tools, writing, and knowledge of the stars. It was the work of so-called prehistoric humans, people who weren't supposed to know anything. The site consists of massive T-shaped limestone pillars, carved and arranged in perfect circles, some weighing over 20 tons. But these weren't just standing stones. They were decorated with precise, intricate carvings. And yet history tells us that people of this era did not have the tools or the knowledge to ever create anything like this. So how is this possible? Mainstream historians will tell you Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers. That scattered tribe somehow coordinated to move thousands of tons of stone and build what is now recognized as the oldest known temple on Earth. But that explanation raises more questions than it answers. Because when archaeologists examined the site, they didn't find the remains of homes, no kitchens, no cemeteries, no agricultural fields. This wasn't a settlement where people lived. It was built for something else, but the purpose is still unknown. But that's not the strangest part. The strangest part is that it was buried, not by time or nature. Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried, filled in, layer by human hands. But why would a civilization go to such extraordinary lengths to construct something so massive, only to hide it beneath the earth? Civilizations fall from war, disease, or famine, but they don't return to their sacred places and bury them as if trying to erase them. It's as if someone, or something, wanted it forgotten, or perhaps preserved, for a time when it would be needed again. But to understand what Göbekli Tepe truly is, we have to read the stones, and what they refused to forget. The carvings of catastrophe. Buried beneath layers of dust and time, the pillars of Göbekli Tepe aren't just ancient stone, they're messages. Messages carved in desperation, memory, or warning. And some of them are almost too precise to ignore. These carved pillars of Göbekli Tepe were never meant to be just stones. And among them, Pillar 43 is the most famous. Known as the Vulture Stone, it features a scene unlike anything else from the ancient world. A vulture stands tall, wings outstretched, beside a scorpion and what appears to be a falling orb. Beneath it all, a headless human figure lies limp, its body oddly rigid, its detachment from life made explicit. For decades, archaeologists believed these carvings were symbolic or ritualistic, maybe representations of death, the soul, or ancestral worship. But others saw something more. Researchers like Martin Sweatman proposed that these animals correspond to constellations, the scorpion as Scorpius, the vulture as Sagittarius, and that the entire panel could be a celestial map frozen in stone. The timing it points to is roughly 10,950 BCE, the same period some scientists associate with a sudden global cooling event known as the Younger Dryas, possibly caused by a comet impact. In this reading, the headless man is not a myth. He is memory, a victim of something cosmic. The stone, then, isn't ritual, it's record. Then there's Pillar 56, less famous but no less disturbing. This pillar is located in enclosure H, and carved deep into these ancient stone pillars are creatures that don't belong together: foxes, lions, scorpions, snakes, boars, even human-animal hybrids. The artwork? Shockingly advanced. But here's the twist. The oldest pillars are the most detailed. The newer ones? Cruder and less skilled. It's like the craftsmanship didn't evolve. It devolved. As if some lost technology or forgotten civilization just vanished overnight. Unlike Pillar 43, there's no central narrative here. It's chaos, a compressed bestiary with no clear direction. But the sheer number and the repetition of specific species suggests something intentional. Was it a warning about the natural world? A record of a collapsing ecosystem? Or maybe a mythic account of a time when the lines between man and beast blurred? Some believe this dense visual language acted like a code, a calendar of omens, or an inventory of danger. Whatever the case, it's not casual art. It's structured, deliberate, and it feels frantic, as if the carvers were trying to remember too much in too little space. And then there's Pillar 18, which is perhaps the most important of all. It stands at the center of enclosure D, towering between the twin monoliths believed to represent deity-like figures. Unlike the others, Pillar 18 carries something else entirely: writing, or at least something dangerously close to it. Carved onto the belt of the pillar is a sequence of signs, one that repeats: a C-shaped curve, an H, and a reverse C. To modern archaeologists, it might look like an abstract pattern, but to some, this design is a word, the only known inscribed word at Göbekli Tepe. And based on comparisons with Anatolian hieroglyphs, some researchers believe it translates to a word meaning God. If that's true, then Göbekli Tepe isn't just the world's oldest temple. It's the first place where the idea of divinity was carved into stone, in literal form. But the carvings aren't alone in delivering their message. The pillars themselves were laid out like a cosmic map. Almost every major enclosure at the site aligns precisely with the rising and setting points of key stars and lunar events. Researchers have noted that many of the central T-pillars in enclosures C, D, E, and H form lines that track the rising of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, an astronomical phenomenon that would have become particularly significant around 9600 BCE, when Sirius began to reappear on the horizon after thousands of years of being invisible due to Earth's precession. So why would prehistoric people build massive stone pillars to point at a star? Who taught them to map the heavens so precisely at a time when conventional history says they didn't even farm, let alone study the skies? Across site maps, we can see these orientations repeated with surgical precision. Enclosure F appears positioned to catch the sunrise on a day halfway between the midwinter solstice and spring equinox, maybe marking an early agricultural date. Other enclosures track the minor lunar standstill, a cycle only observable by dedicated skywatchers over years. Who had the knowledge and the will to embed these cycles in stone? But perhaps the strangest part of all this is the timing. Every alignment converges between 10,950 and 9,600 BCE, which is the time Göbekli Tepe was constructed. But it is also the very period Plato claimed Atlantis sank beneath the sea. That's not a coincidence. It's a cosmological timestamp. So was this temple a celestial observatory born from refugees, survivors of a cataclysm who carried sky mapping secrets across generations? Did they bury the site to protect their knowledge until a future civilization could decode it? What we are left with is a site that suggests not the start of civilization, but a restart. Echoes of Atlantis. We've all heard the story. A mighty island empire, rich, powerful, and advanced, one that dared to challenge the world. And then, in a single day and night, it was gone. That's how Plato described Atlantis. Atlantis was long dismissed as nothing more than a myth, a dramatic story about pride and punishment. But in his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, Plato gives us more details: names, measurements, timelines, and geography. And these details make it hard to believe that Atlantis is just a mythical tale. He describes it as an enormous island empire, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, ruled by god-kings. The cities were advanced, with monumental temples, complex irrigation systems, stone-lined canals, massive naval fleets, and even walls clad in bronze and orichalcum, a mysterious metal said to shine like fire. He dates its destruction to around 9,600 BCE, when disaster struck, and in a single day and night Atlantis was swallowed by earthquakes and floods, disappearing beneath the sea. To most historians, it all sounded too elaborate, too precise, and too early to be real, so for years it was written off as an allegory, just a myth wrapped in philosophy. But that date never stopped echoing, because studies show that around 9,600 to 10,900 BCE, the world was already fracturing. The younger Dryas brought a sudden, brutal shift in climate. Temperatures dropped, giant animals vanished, and sea levels surged. Stories of floods, sunken lands, and lost civilizations aren't just myths passed down through cultures. They line up with real geological events. And then right in the middle of all that came Göbekli Tepe, a site carved from stone, buried with intent, rising in the hills of Anatolia, built during that exact window of time. Its pillars weren't placed at random. They were aligned with the stars, Sirius, Orion, Deneb, the moon's cycles and solar movements. These weren't just decorations, they were astronomical markers, and somehow hunter-gatherers, people who supposedly had no writing, no farming, no math, built what looks like a sky map carved in stone, not a temple to worship gods, but a monument to remember something. So what does it all point to? It all narrows into one chilling theory. Göbekli Tepe wasn't built by the first civilization, but by the last survivors of the one before, the fallen Atlanteans. Atlantis collapsed in a single cataclysmic night around 9,600 BCE, just as Plato described, swallowed by earthquakes and floods. Its survivors, priests, astronomers, skywatchers, migrated east. They brought with them something that defied their era: knowledge of the stars, tales of floods and drowned kings, and the memory of skies that could rain fire. They arrived at Göbekli Tepe, sat beneath the night sky, and built a monument that would last longer than scrolls ever could. They aligned the stones to Sirius, which began to reappear around that time, a signal that the stars themselves had shifted. They marked lunar cycles, solstices, and harvests. They carved pillars with vultures, scorpions, and headless humans, icons of comet-induced destruction. They inscribed God in stone for the first time. Then they buried it, not destroyed it, preserved it. Layer by layer, stone by stone, hidden beneath sediment, sealed until someone could understand. Today, when archaeologists decode Göbekli Tepe's star alignments, comet imagery, and lunar solar carvings, they're not just reading ancient art, they're reading verified memory, and they're reading the echo of Atlantis. This all might sound too strange to believe, but it's a theory supported by real research and serious investigation. For years, writers like Graham Hancock and others in alternative archaeology have suggested that Göbekli Tepe might be the work of survivors from an earlier advanced civilization, possibly Atlantis. According to Hancock, the temple's star alignments and strange carvings aren't random or primitive. They're the fingerprints of a people who lived through a global disaster. In his book, Magicians of the Gods, he connects the construction of Göbekli Tepe to a major event around 10,800 BCE, the same time as Plato's Atlantis and a real climate shift known as the Younger Dryas. Another thread of research centers on Klaus Schmidt, the archaeologist who led the original excavations. These studies found that Göbekli Tepe was ritually buried around 8000 BCE, a construction and closure timeline echoing a civilization recovering from global trauma. Some scholars argue this burial mirrors a cultural memory of devastation, one that may trace back to flood myths and shared legends across civilizations such as Atlantis, Sumer, and even the biblical flood story. While mainstream archaeology remains cautious, often attributing Göbekli Tepe to local hunter-gatherer cooperation, these alternative perspectives weave together date-matching, star-calibrated architecture and cosmic catastrophe imagery to suggest a unified narrative, refugees from a drowned civilization seeding their knowledge into a new world. So could Atlantis have been real? Maybe. And if so, the people who lived through its fall built Göbekli Tepe not to start civilization, but to remind civilization what could end it. Just carvings or warnings etched in stone. The carvings at Göbekli Tepe suggest something terrifying, that the world has ended once, and it can end again. And when we match the patterns between the ancient past and our modern present, what we see is disturbingly mirrored. Back then, around 10,900 to 9,600 BCE, the planet plunged into the younger Dryas, a sudden climate collapse. Temperatures dropped by as much as 10 degrees Celsius, glaciers expanded, megafauna vanished, and global sea levels shifted dramatically. Coastal communities would have vanished beneath rising waters, forests died, and entire ecosystems collapsed. Today, we're staring at similar threats. In 2023, Antarctic sea ice plunged by 2.5 million square kilometers, a 5 sigma collapse, utterly unexpected, disrupting global heat exchange. Satellite data confirms Antarctica lost 150 billion tons of ice annually from 2002 to 2023. The Thwaites Doomsday Glacier, destabilized by warm ocean currents, could unlock 0.5 to 1 meter of global sea level rise in the next centuries. The geological impacts are clear and worrying. Studies show that as ice melts, land rebounds and faults are reactivated. In places like the Alps and Rockies, glacial retreat has increased microquake activity. A 2025 European study confirmed that sea level rises and hydrological shifts are reawakening faults worldwide, triggering more earthquakes. This is no future speculation. These are documented changes: planetary destabilization, melting ice, rising seas, and shifting fault lines, all echoing the chaos of 10,000 BCE. So is Göbekli Tepe a tombstone marking the end of one world, or a warning for ours? What if the stones of Göbekli Tepe are speaking, and we've just begun to listen? Could they be warning us about our future by showing us their past? How many times has the world ended before? Let us know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more mysteries written in stone. Thanks for watching.